I can't believe we're here, but today I get to share the story about how me and my husband got 3 rentals before I turned 30. And at the end, I'm going to share what I would have done if I had known what I know now back then. If you're new around here, welcome. I'm Elena. I make videos with money hacks that will help you save some money and give you hope for a brighter financial future for yourself and those you care about. If that interests you, please hit that subscribe button. This story starts 5 or 6 years ago when we bought our first house. I was just graduating college. My husband had been working as I was in college, and he had been taking care of all the budgeting and been doing a great job. And he'd managed to save us some money for a down payment on a house. We did not know anything about buying houses, and everything felt so scary, and we signed all that terrifying paperwork. But we bought that first house. It was a 3-2, so 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, had a lovely backyard, a little attached 1-car garage. It was awesome. We were not even thinking about going into the landlord rental business at that point. We just wanted a house, and we thought maybe we would stay there for quite a long time. And it had a master bedroom with a bathroom. This house was super basic. Nothing fancy. They had just replaced all the floors with carpet. Nothing needed to be fixed right away, but we could do some upgrading if we felt like it. And then I started cooking up plans. I had my first baby. I had lots of time to watch YouTube, and I was watching Our Rich Journey and seeing what they had done. And I was starting to think of ideas. What could we do? How could we do this? What would it look like for us? What's actually possible for us? So the idea machine pretty much started when my son was born, and that was 4.5 years ago. So then I had to get my husband on board with this plan because this is a little bit crazy to start thinking about wanting to be a landlord. So we started reading, we started listening to podcasts. We read books together. One of our favorite books that we read was the Landlord book by Brandon Turner. We listened to a ton of episodes of Bigger Pockets. We started talking to people. We went and met with people that we knew were landlords, and we're like, what is it like? What do we need to know? Is this something we should consider or not? Would this be terrible? All the things. Then we started getting serious, and we had decided that the cheapest way to get a rental property was to keep the house that we were living in at the time and buy a new house and move to the new house. So we knew that we were keeping the house we were living in, so we started tenant proofing it. We started making sure everything was indestructible. We were putting up the last details. We were making sure everything was safe. We were putting in the little back porch. We were putting extra cinder blocks under the front porch so that it wouldn't sink in, even if there was tons of snow on it. All the things. We were double checking everything and making sure everything was in tip-top shape. So a lot of this happened over one winter, and we were also getting together our rental papers. So we were working on our lease. We were working on all those extra papers that you need. We were working on our mission statement as landlords. We were working on our inspection checklist. There are a million papers that go with being a landlord, and I'm so glad we went through this entire process because we really know our stuff up and down. The other thing we were doing is we were reading our state's laws on landlording, tenants, everything, so that we could be 100% by the book on everything and not get in trouble in any way. And yes, reading the law is pretty boring, but we did it. You could see that as a little bit overboard, but I wanted to be more prepared than necessary for this big step, and I didn't want things to fall apart later as we mismanaged our property. So we wanted to do all the research in advance. So spring came around and it was go time. This was so terrifying. So then we got approved for a loan. And part of the conditions of this loan was that we needed a signed lease from our tenants that were moving into our old house. Also, this was the year 2020. Just keep that in mind as all this craziness goes down. Sometimes I can't believe we pulled this off or we even attempted this, but when you have a plan, you just got to go for it and hope for the best and pray that everything works out. One of the other things that we had been doing during all of this research and tenant proofing and stuff we were also saving money for our down payment on the next house. So we were squirreling away all our extra pennies, and my mom's asking me why we aren't spending more money on food, but we were squirreling away our pennies for that next down payment. So we got our offer accepted on the new house, and then they say, you have 10 days to have a signed lease from your tenant at your first house. That was the most terrifying 10 days of our lives, and we actually needed to get an extension. So I think we found them in 14 days, or we got the extension to 14 days. So we had 14 days to get a signed lease. And as first time landlords, this was nerve-wracking. And all that research that we did before, we were not sorry about at all. We did end up finding our first tenants for that place, and they were actually long distance people, and their showing was a Zoom showing. So my husband never actually met these people before they came and lived at our house. The whole thing was a little bit wild, but I'm so thankful that it all worked out. I only told you half of the harebrained plan on that front, but the other half was that we bought a house with the potential for an Airbnb. A separate Airbnb that was walled off from us, but was still part of our house. I have a whole Airbnb playlist, so check that out later if you want to get more into that. So basically, we moved to the new house, which needs lots of work. Of course, if you want a good deal on a house, it basically needs to be a fixer-upper. So it had the popcorn ceilings that my husband was scraping after work before we moved. It had the horrible carpet that we had to get replaced the second month we were there. All the things, all the countertops had to go. All the bathrooms were horrid, everything. So lots of work went into this second house too. So we moved into our fixer-upper house and we started renovating this Airbnb. We had never been Airbnb hosts before, but we wanted to try it out and see if we could house hack in this way. Because an Airbnb, I could clean during the day because I was home with the kids, and we could get some extra income from that. So we put an Airbnb in the attached garage space that someone else had turned into a master bedroom. So we converted that, we closed off the door there and turned it into an Airbnb. I think it took us like a month and a half to get it up and going because we had to spray the shower and blah, blah, blah. You can watch that video about all that drama, but that was a lot of work, and my husband's dad came and helped us for a little bit on that too. And then, so much painting. So with this one move, we got 2 units. We got a long-term unit and a short-term unit. And we also made the big move to becoming landlords so we could see what it was like, whether or not we liked it or not, and whether or not we would consider doing this ever again. Okay, now we are in house B. We're living there. It was a 4-2, so 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and there was a garage in the back. So much work needed to be done on this house. It was kind of a downgrade from the other house, but it had that Airbnb potential. So basically, we personally only had to pay like $500 of our mortgage every month because of how much money the Airbnb was bringing in. And that is pretty cool because our first apartment ever was a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom, hole in the wall, and it was $520 a month. So we had lowered our living expenses below what they were at our very first cheap apartment. And that felt incredibly clever. And we had this new income from house A as the long-term rental. So at house B, we replaced the deck with a beautiful Trex deck. We painted the entire exterior, most of the interior. We replaced the countertops with quartz countertops. We wallpapered the living room. We replaced all the flooring except for the kitchen. We replaced the bathroom floors in both bathrooms, both of the toilets. We did bath fitters for both bathrooms. We put bathtubs in each one. One of them was a bathtub to bathtub conversion, and the other one was a shower to bathtub conversion. I have separate videos on each of those if you want to go watch those bath fitter videos. We changed lots of outlets, painted bedrooms. Also, the house didn't have any trim when we moved in. I mean, like no baseboard, nothing. So we put in trim all over the house. Some of the doors got replaced. At the end, we kind of gave up because we didn't have enough time. We did replace the hideous carpet that you couldn't see the bugs in with other carpet, which I kind of regret, but it's really cheap to put in all carpet, especially if you hire someone to do it. They just do it all in one day and then it's fresh right away. But if you like install the vinyl planking yourself, it's more expensive and it's very labor intensive. And that concludes 2020 and 2021. Okay, it's 2022 and we're starting to think about what would be our next move. We also had a baby in 2021, so that kind of took me out of commission for a good year also. So we were like, okay, could we buy a rental outright? And if you've ever thought about buying a rental outright, it's really expensive and requires a lot of cash because you need at least 15 to 25% down, and that can be a lot of money. So it really makes the most sense to move and keep the house that you have as a rental. And I worked this so many different ways. Like, what if we kept house B and turned it into an Airbnb and I went over there and cleaned it? And I'm like, no, that's insane. I have 2 small children. I can't do that. And then we're like, what if we kept one side of the Airbnb and we only did long term and then we did short term on the other side? What if we did 2 Airbnbs? What if we, anyway, so many ideas. We finally settled on we're going to move and we're going to turn the whole thing into one long-term rental. One, because I can't clean an Airbnb off-site. That's insane. And then no confusion among the tenants. Like if there's Airbnb tenants and long-term tenants and they're getting each other's way and they're having arguments or whatever. I just don't want to deal with that. Also knew that if we moved, we would have a cash flowing rental right away. Our long-term rental or house B would cash flow out of the gate because of all the appreciation that had happened and how low our mortgage was. It is a beautiful owner-occupied mortgage. It's around 3% or something, which is glorious these days. So I was like, we don't want to get rid of this mortgage because it's awesome. And the payment is pretty low, so we could definitely cash flow right away. And cash flow is a big deal to me because I don't want long-term rentals to be costing us money every month. That is silly. And then this is when things start to get really crazy. So we're at this random event and someone that we almost worked with for our first mortgage on home A was there, and we were talking him up and he was telling us about these different programs that we might be able to do. And we're like, sure, we'll just go have a meeting. We'll talk about what we could afford, what this might look like, what are our options. You don't really know what you can do and what you can't do until you actually go and talk to someone and tell them your exact financial position, and then they can give you real numbers about what you could actually afford. So we're like, what's the harm? It's getting on to fall, so it kind of would be harder to find a tenant because summer's the glory days of finding renters. But we're like, we could do it this fall or we could do it in the spring. And I was originally thinking we were doing it in the spring, but it didn't work out that way. So we went to this meeting and we're like, sure, we'll get approved for the loan. If something perfect comes up and it would just be glorious, sure, we can go for it. No problem. So we went ahead and we got approved for the loan. It does ding your credit because they pull your credit score, but by the time you need to reapply to be qualified, your credit score has recovered from that ding. Then, of course, we started looking for houses with our realtor. And all of these things just lined up perfectly. So we got approved on a Wednesday, and then this house was listed, I think, on Friday. And then I kind of looked at it and I was like, because I'm always on Zillow. And then on Saturday morning, my husband was looking on Zillow and he's like, this one is perfect. We got to go see it. And there was an open house that morning. So that was perfect because our realtor was out of town. So we got to go see the house. We got to go to an open house and we're like walking around. Of course, we have to bring all the kids too. But we're walking around like, wait a minute, this would be perfect. It's totally an awkward house, but it's perfect for what we wanted because we wanted to put a new Airbnb at the new place, of course, because the Airbnb had worked out so great at the other place. But we would love some more separation. We were thinking maybe an attached garage loft or something. And this house is totally funky. It's like there's 2 wings. There's like a tower over here, and then there's the other bedrooms way on the other side of the house. So it feels very separated. And it had 2 backyards. What house has 2 backyards? That's totally awkward normally, but we're like, the Airbnb could have an outside backyard that's not our backyard, and they could have an outside space, and that would be so cool. So we put in our offer, and obviously it got accepted. And I was a huge part of the paperwork this time. For the other first two houses, I didn't do any of the paperwork. My husband did it, and it was great. And I'm just like, la la la, thanks, honey. But this one, I was like, okay, I've got more time. I can do this. And that was a big growing experience for me. And our lender was like, you don't normally need to have a signed lease. Nowadays, we're already a proven landlord and all that jazz. So we'll just do a rent analysis on your old property, property B, and then we can get you closed on the new house without having a signed lease. And I was like, that takes a huge weight off my back. But then, of course, the lender changes their mind. I was already thinking this through, and I was like, I really would like a signed lease before we close because this is a big deal, and I don't want to pay both mortgages at the same time because neither of them are chump change. So we should find a renter anyway. So I was working day and night to finish up the house to get it ready to take pictures of and painting the trim. And I decided at house B to paint our bedroom this really dark color of green. So of course I had to primer it and paint it. But I got that done. And I was like, we got to get our listing up. Then we hear from our mortgage guy, and he's like, well, the lender wants a signed lease. So as soon as you could make that happen, that would be great. I'm like, okay, well, great. This is just how it's going. This means we can't close without it, which means by definition, if we're going to get the house, we're going to have a signed lease. So we worked hard all weekend and we installed the last pieces of trim, or most of them. Some of them we just like posed for the pictures because we knew that we would get them up before we moved, but it wasn't quite ready. Anyway, so we got our listing up. We found some wonderful tenants. We got them approved, did our whole process. My husband streamlined the whole thing. He's becoming the genius at all that. And we got our signed lease within 7 days. I think that's a new record too. And then they're like, would you like to close early on the house? And we're like, sure, yes. So we closed in a record of 20 days, so less than a month. For our other houses, it was 45 days, I think at least. And maybe one of them ran a little bit late, but 20 days, that was intense. And that was pretty cool because another piece of this is that we didn't know we were going to move. So we had some people booked at our Airbnb. But as soon as the tenants move into house B, if we don't have the Airbnb ready to go in the brand new house C, we're in trouble. Or they're just going to have to cancel their reservations. But we didn't want to let people down like that. Like, come and book at the new place instead. We wanted to be able to do that and have some place for them to go because they were planning on staying with us. And, we're still in the same town. So as soon as we closed, we started working on the new Airbnb renovation, and my husband's dad came again. He stayed for over a week and really helped us out so much and got so much of that done. Of course, lots more painting for me, all the little details, all the little extra things to buy. It's kind of fun to get things from Amazon though, so I didn't mind that part too much. But lots of work, and we tried to get that Airbnb up and going as fast as humanly possible because we had those guests that were coming very soon. And just last week, we finished the Airbnb. We got our listing up so that our guests from the old Airbnb can transfer their reservation. And we are settled. We got our long-term tenants in our house B, and now we can finally take a breath. Okay, I know this was a crazy overview, so if you have questions about any parts of this, please leave them in the comments for sure. So that is the story about how we got 3 rentals before I turned 30. One of the cheapest ways to get into rental properties is to buy a house and then move to the next one, because on owner-occupied loans, you can put down as little as 3.5%. Because if you have to buy it as a rental outright, you're looking at 15 to 25%. That's a lot of money that you probably don't have just laying in the back room somewhere. So if you're willing to move, you can make this rental property dream, if you have it, come true. And lastly, what would I do differently if I knew what I know now? And that would be that I would start with a house hack, like a duplex or a space where I could turn part of it into an Airbnb. So when we moved into our first house, we weren't thinking anything crazy like we do now. We weren't thinking about rentals. We weren't thinking about short-term rentals. We weren't thinking about Airbnbs, none of that. So we didn't buy a house that was set up for any of that. So if we had bought in a duplex, we could have lived in half of it and rented out the other half. And I think this is really nice to do at the beginning because life gets more complicated. And then when you have kids, you have more standards about how you want to live. So if you start with that duplex, you can get that house hack going right away. And then when you move out of the duplex, you already have 2 units. When we bought our house, we were living in this teeny apartment with 2 bedrooms and 1 teeny little bath. And, it was not awesome. It was fine, but it was really kind of a crummy place. And so we were so impressed with this big house. But we would have been impressed with a duplex too, because we would have owned it and maybe it would have had a little yard. We were like in one of those cement tower sort of things, it's just icky. So any sort of upgrade would be awesome, but it's really hard to go backwards. So it's not like I want to go live in a duplex now. Even if that would be an awesome move, I'm like, I'm not going to live next to my tenants. But if we had done that at the beginning before we had kids, totally no problem. So if I had to start all over again, I would have started with a duplex. If you have questions about any part of this real estate journey, or you want more information on a particular section of this video, please leave that in the comments. It really helps out this video when you like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you in the next one. Bye for now.